The crowd screamed. A tiny body had just vanished into the lion's den. Everyone froze, except one lion. And what he did next would change everything the world thought it knew about predators. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday at the city zoo. Children giggled, parents strolled with strollers, and cotton candy spun joyfully in the breeze. The sun was high, and the lions, usually asleep in their shaded rock formation, lay with their golden coats glistening. No one expected the next few seconds to bring complete silence, followed by utter chaos. 6-year-old Daniel was clinging to the railing near the lion enclosure. His mother had warned him not to lean too far, but excitement danced in his eyes as he pointed toward the largest male lion lying on the sun-drenched rock. "Look, Mom. That one's the king." And then it happened. The worn metal rail beneath Daniel's tiny hands gave way. One hinge had rusted too much, and with a sharp creak, the bar jerked. Daniel lost balance. His body tilted forward, and before anyone could grab him, he disappeared over the edge. Gasps rang out. Time froze. He fell nearly 15 feet, landing with a painful thud in the middle of the lion's territory. A hush settled over the crowd above as dozens peered down in horror. Daniel wasn't moving. And then the lions noticed. The large male, known as Caesar, rose to his feet, muscles rippling beneath his thick mane. At 420 pounds, his mere presence could stop the heart of a grown man. Behind him, 2 lionesses stood as well, their eyes fixed on the tiny figure crumpled near the inner boulder. A woman shrieked. It was Daniel's mother. "Help. Somebody help my baby," she cried, her voice trembling and hoarse from fear. Zoo staff rushed forward, but protocol required tranquilizers, not bravery. The keeper's trembling hands reached for the emergency radio, stuttering into the mic. Code red, child in lion exhibit. I repeat, child in lion exhibit. Security scrambled, keepers shouted commands, tranquilizers were readied, but all of it would take time. Time they didn't have. Because Caesar was moving. He descended from his rock slowly, deliberately. The crowd could barely breathe. Each of his giant paws patted across the sand with quiet power. Daniel stirred slightly, just a twitch, but it was enough. The lionesses growled, low and alert. "Stay back, Caesar," a keeper muttered to himself as if the lion could hear. But then, Caesar did something no one expected. He stopped. Right in front of Daniel. The big lion lowered his head, sniffing the boy's hair gently. A growl rose from one of the lionesses behind, but Caesar turned his head and growled back, a deep, commanding rumble. She stopped instantly, sat down and blinked. The entire zoo held its breath. Caesar lay down. Yes, he lay down next to Daniel's body. The king of the lions curled his massive frame around the child. Not in aggression. Not in hunger. But as if to shield him. Gasps erupted. A few people started crying. "He's protecting him," someone whispered. Keepers who'd worked at the zoo for decades stood frozen, their radios forgotten. The head keeper, Marcus, could barely believe what he was seeing. Caesar had been raised in captivity but still possessed all the instincts of a wild beast. And yet here he was, guarding a human child as if he were a cub. Daniel stirred again, letting out a soft whimper. His small hand brushed against Caesar's fur. The lion didn't flinch. He let out a soft, grumbly huff, like a father annoyed but patient. Marcus snapped out of his trance. "We have a chance," he said to the staff. "We have to get him out now." But how? No one dared descend into the enclosure. Caesar might be calm now, but one wrong move, one shout, one sudden action could turn that calm into chaos. "I'm going in," Marcus said. "What?" Another keeper gasped. "He could tear you apart in seconds." Marcus looked back at Caesar, then at the boy. "He won't. Not if we're calm." He grabbed the long catchpole and descended the service ladder tucked behind the artificial rock wall. The crowd watched in silence. The mother sobbed openly into her hands. Step by slow step, Marcus moved across the habitat floor. The other lions had retreated to the shade, clearly understanding Caesar's silent command. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. But Caesar didn't move. When Marcus was just 5 feet away, Caesar lifted his head, his golden eyes locking onto the man. For a split second, everything teetered. But then the lion did something again, something unbelievable. He stood up and slowly stepped aside. Daniel lay curled and unconscious in the sand, and Caesar stepped back just enough to give Marcus a path. As if granting permission. Marcus wasted no time. He gently scooped the boy into his arms, whispering calming words the whole time. The child's head flopped slightly, but he was breathing. Thank God he was breathing. Caesar gave one final look at them. Then turned and walked away. Back up the rocks. As Marcus reached the ladder with Daniel in his arms, the crowd erupted into thunderous cheers and sobs. EMTs rushed in as the boy was handed off, and the mother screamed as she finally held her son again. But no one could stop talking about Caesar, the lion who protected a child. The headlines would soon spread like wildfire, and debates would erupt across the world. Was it instinct? Was it empathy? Was it a miracle? But none of that mattered right now, because a boy had fallen into a den of lions and been saved by one. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Daniel was rushed to the nearest trauma center, still unconscious but stable. His mother sobbed quietly in the passenger seat, holding his tiny hand and whispering prayers. Outside the zoo, sirens wailed and flashing red lights painted the parking lot with chaos. But inside the lion enclosure, Caesar stood alone. The lion who had just cradled a human child, now watched his world unravel. Marcus stayed behind as medics and zookeepers buzzed in frantic movement. He couldn't stop replaying it in his head, the moment Caesar moved aside and let him pass. That gentle nudge, the look in those golden eyes, it wasn't animalistic. It was aware. The press arrived within 30 minutes. Before Caesar could even return to his shaded rock, camera flashes blinded him from beyond the enclosure. News vans parked crookedly on sidewalks. Helicopters circled overhead. And social media? It exploded. Hashtag Caesar the Lion. Hashtag Zoo Miracle. Hashtag Lion Guardian. Millions watched the shaky phone footage taken by a teenager named Lexi, who happened to be filming the lion exhibit when Daniel fell. Her hands shook, but the world saw everything: the fall, the roar of the crowd, the lion standing guard. By evening, Caesar was the most talked about creature on the planet. But not everyone was celebrating. At the city's zoo management office, the boardroom was tense. A man in a sleek navy suit, Dr. Alan Rowe, the zoo's executive director, paced angrily. "This lion has now been involved in a major incident," he snapped. "We're lucky the boy survived. That enclosure should have been foolproof." "But Caesar didn't hurt the boy," said Lydia Chin, head of animal welfare. "He protected him. You've seen the footage." Alan narrowed his eyes. "We can't rely on viral footage for decisions. If we're sued, we're finished. PHA steps in with a full investigation. We're done." There was a pause. Then Alan delivered the words that made Lydia's stomach twist. "Put Caesar under behavioral evaluation. Full isolation. If he shows any sign of unpredictability, we may have to consider euthanasia." The room fell silent. "You want to kill the lion that saved a child?" Lydia asked, barely containing her outrage. "I want to protect this institution," Alan barked. "But at what cost?" she said quietly. Back at the enclosure, Caesar was no longer on public display. Overnight, he'd been sedated and moved to a holding habitat, sterile, silent, and solitary. He awoke groggily, his limbs heavy and his vision blurred. Gone were the soft rustling grasses and warm sunlight. Now just walls. Cold walls. He let out a low, confused growl. His usual caretakers weren't allowed near him anymore. Cameras had been installed to track his behavior, and zookeepers were ordered to observe from a distance only. Lydia watched from behind the glass, heart aching. This wasn't just any lion. Caesar had been born at the zoo. She'd been there the day he opened his eyes for the first time, a fuzzy golden puff with a too big head. He'd lost his siblings to illness early on, and Lydia had practically raised him herself. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't a killer. She knew Caesar. And now, they were treating him like a threat. At the hospital, Daniel finally opened his eyes. His voice was hoarse, but the first word out of his mouth was soft, unmistakable. "Lion." His mother burst into tears. Nurses called for the doctors. But Daniel wasn't crying. In fact, he looked peaceful. "The lion was warm," he whispered. "He kept me warm." That one quote made the morning headlines. "Little boy says lion protected him like a blanket." Daniel had suffered only minor internal bruising and a dislocated shoulder. Considering the height of the fall, and the presence of 3 adult lions, it was a miracle. But while the world cheered Daniel's recovery, Caesar's future hung by a thread. News coverage grew more intense. Debates flooded the airwaves. Experts were invited to argue whether Caesar's behavior was instinct, coincidence, or a display of cross-species empathy. A few extremists online demanded Caesar be removed from public display permanently, arguing he had become unpredictable. But others, millions in fact, saw something different. They saw hope. They saw a glimpse of compassion in a creature humans were taught to fear. One video surfaced that broke the internet again. a quiet moment from the zoo's surveillance footage that hadn't been shown yet. In the clip, Caesar was lying alone in the sterile holding cell. The camera zoomed in just as he curled up, not to sleep, but as if wrapping himself around an invisible presence. Just like he had with Daniel. The comments section exploded. He misses the boy. You can't fake that. That lion felt something. Caesar is a hero. Don't let them destroy him. Petition started. First a few hundred signatures. Then tens of thousands. By midnight, over 2 million people had signed a global plea to save Caesar. Protesters gathered outside the zoo gates. Children held hand-drawn signs. He saved Daniel, now save him. Lydia, watching it all unfold, knew she had to act. She barged into the boardroom with footage, files, and fury. You can't isolate him like this. He's deteriorating. He's not dangerous. You know this animal. I know this animal. And now the entire world knows this animal. Alan looked pale. His usual composure was cracking. And if you don't let Caesar return to his enclosure, Lydia said calmly, you won't just have global outrage. You'll have me, on every camera, telling everyone how you punished a lion for being merciful. Alan swallowed hard. Outside the boardroom, the chants of protesters echoed, Save Caesar! Save Caesar! He finally nodded. Give me 24 hours. But 24 hours may not be enough. Because while Caesar lay alone, someone had just slipped into the zoo under the cover of darkness. And they weren't here to help him. It was just past 1 a.m. The zoo, closed for the night, was cloaked in stillness. Motion sensor lights flicked lazily along back corridors, and security guards rotated between stations in tired silence. But near the off-limits wing where Caesar was being held, something moved that wasn't supposed to. A figure, masked, gloved, and careful, slipped through a service entrance using a keycard stolen earlier that day. He moved with purpose. In his bag was a small syringe filled with something colorless and deadly. Caesar stirred from sleep, sensing something before he even heard it. His ears twitched, his golden eyes blinked once in the dim artificial light. The intruder hadn't made a sound yet, but Caesar was no ordinary lion. He rose slowly, his breath forming clouds in the cooler holding chamber. The man crouched near the gate, watching Caesar through the bars. You don't even know how much trouble you've caused, he muttered. His name was Brent Calloway, a high-ranking zoo board member and personal friend of director Alan Rowe. But Brent had another life too, quiet investments in private exotic animal trades, illegal sales of rare species to wealthy collectors. And Caesar, after going viral, had become valuable in all the wrong ways. He was too famous now. Too unpredictable. If the public demanded Caesar's release or rehoming, Brent and his underground buyers could lose control of the lion entirely. There was only one solution. Remove Caesar. Quietly. Make it look like health failure. Let the public grieve, and then forget. Brent drew the syringe from his coat, his hand steady. He reached toward the lock. Across the zoo, Lydia couldn't sleep. She'd returned after midnight, unable to silence the worry in her chest. She knew Caesar was in danger, not just from zoo leadership, but from those who feared what he represented. Empathy in a predator, a threat to outdated beliefs, and worst of all, a public symbol too powerful to control. Lydia walked quickly past the entrance, waving off the night guard. Just checking some notes, she lied, holding up a clipboard. But her instincts were on high alert. Then she saw it. The small red light above Caesar's service gate wasn't blinking like usual. It was solid. Someone was inside. Lydia dropped the clipboard and ran. Brent had just opened the access gate to the chamber. His heart pounded, not from fear of Caesar but fear of being caught. He stepped forward, needle poised in his palm. Caesar stood still, watching him. He didn't growl. He didn't pounce. He just stared. Brent hesitated. It felt wrong. The lion was so calm. So aware. But money talks louder than guilt. He took one more step. Freeze. Lydia's voice ripped through the air, sharp and furious. Brent spun, hiding the syringe behind his back. What are you doing here? He snapped. I could ask you the same, she said, marching forward. You're not on Caesar's approved access list. He gave a fake laugh. Alan asked me to check on the camera feed, malfunction earlier today. Lydia didn't buy a word of it. Then why are you inside the enclosure with a tranquilizer in your bare hand, Brent? She saw the glint of the needle. And then Caesar growled. A deep, thunderous vibration filled the room. It wasn't anger, it was warning. Brent looked at the lion, then at Lydia, his face twisting. You're making a mistake. No, Lydia said, stepping forward. You already made yours. Security rushed in moments later. Brent was taken into custody, still insisting it was just a misunderstanding. But the syringe tested positive for etorphine, a powerful drug used to euthanize large animals. Lydia demanded immediate action. He was trying to kill Caesar. Cover it up. I guarantee Alan knew. The police opened an investigation. Within hours, Director Alan Rowe was suspended, pending charges for conspiracy and negligence. A full audit of the zoo began. The headlines exploded again. Attempted assassination of hero lion sparks global outrage. Whistleblower zookeeper stops plot to kill famous lion. Meanwhile, Caesar was moved, this time not to a cage but to a sanctuary. The Silver Plains Wildlife Refuge, a 500-acre conservation land just outside the city, agreed to take him in under full protection. It wasn't a prison, it was freedom. Rolling grass, sun-soaked boulders, and other lions rescued from captivity. Lydia rode with Caesar in the transport truck. He lay in a reinforced crate but calm as ever. She rested her hand gently on the edge of the crate and whispered, "You did something the world will never forget. Now it's our turn to protect you." For the first time since the incident, Lydia smiled. Caesar was safe. 2 weeks later, Daniel arrived at the sanctuary. His arms still in a sling, his steps careful, but his eyes lit up the moment he saw Caesar lying peacefully in the distance under a shady tree. Caesar lifted his head, ears flicking, and turned. The boy smiled. The lion blinked once. And though they couldn't speak the same language, something passed between them. A soft recognition. A thread of memory. A silent bond. Daniel tugged at his mother's hand. "Can we come back every year?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. Every year. The world never forgot Caesar. He wasn't just a lion. He was a protector. A symbol. A bridge between instinct and empathy. His story would be taught in classrooms, shared in documentaries, and told by parents to their children when they visited the sanctuary. And as for Lydia? She founded a new organization, the Caesar Project, dedicated to protecting misunderstood animals across the globe. Her first mission: rescue big cats from exploitative zoos and circuses. Because she had seen firsthand what compassion from a lion looked like. And she would never let the world take that for granted again. 3 months passed. The sun was golden over the Silver Plains Wildlife Refuge, casting long shadows across the savanna-like landscape. The tall grasses swayed gently in the breeze, and birds darted above the canopy of trees. The place felt less like a sanctuary, and more like a second chance. Caesar had found his rhythm. He spent his days exploring his wide territory, basking on warm rock outcrops, and interacting with other rescued lions from around the world. Some were cautious around him at first. After all, lion hierarchies could be rigid, but Caesar, calm and confident, didn't assert himself aggressively. He didn't need to. It wasn't dominance he was after. It was peace. Lydia visited every week. She often stood at the edge of the open viewing platform, clipboard forgotten in hand, just watching. Sometimes Caesar would notice her and his ears would twitch. He never approached the glass like before, but he didn't need to. He knew she was there. One day she brought a framed photo and left it by the staff lodge. It showed a younger Caesar, only a cub, nestled in her lap. She was smiling. So was he, at least as much as a lion could. Below the frame she placed a brass plaque. The lion who remembered how to be gentle. Daniel's story was picked up by several global networks. His mother, at first hesitant about all the attention, eventually agreed to an interview on a major talk show. Daniel, now more confident, sat beside her with wide eyes as video of Caesar played on the screen behind them. "I thought he was going to eat me," the boy said with a laugh, clutching a plush lion doll in his lap. "But then he just hugged me. It felt like he wanted me to feel safe." The host wiped a tear and turned to the audience. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the most powerful moments come from the most unexpected protectors." At the Silver Plains Refuge, Caesar's presence had changed everything. Visitor numbers soared, not for entertainment but for education. People came from all over to hear the story, to see the lion who defied centuries of expectation, and to reflect on their own place in the animal world. More importantly, donations poured in. The sanctuary expanded its enclosures, funded anti-poaching programs in Africa, and launched rescue operations in several war-torn regions. Lydia, leading the charge through her Caesar Project Foundation, partnered with wildlife preserves in Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa. Caesar's act of mercy had sparked a global movement. One morning something extraordinary happened. It was just before dawn. The grass was still damp with dew, and the sanctuary was quiet. Lydia had come early, hoping to observe Caesar's social patterns from a newly installed hideout station. As she watched through binoculars, she saw him rise from his resting spot and make his way across the field, slowly but deliberately. The other lions followed at a distance, curious but respectful. Then Caesar stopped at a place where a small stone memorial had been placed, a tribute to rescued lions that didn't survive long enough to see the open plains. Caesar laid down beside it. And then he roared. A long, slow, thunderous call. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Lydia, heart pounding, recorded the moment with trembling hands. It felt sacred. As if Caesar, the once imprisoned lion, was mourning those who never got a chance. Paying tribute. Giving voice to the silent. When the footage was released, the world reacted with awe. National Geographic did a full-length feature. BBC Earth followed with a documentary. Even the United Nations reached out to honor Caesar's story during their World Wildlife Conservation Day campaign. During the ceremony, Daniel, now healthier, more vibrant, was invited on stage. He held a microphone in shaking hands, but when he spoke, the room fell silent. "I don't remember everything from that day," he said, "but I remember what I felt. I felt loved. I felt safe." He paused, his eyes scanning the audience. If a lion can care for a child, then maybe we can care for animals. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The entire hall rose to its feet in thunderous applause. Caesar's legacy didn't fade with time. Years passed. Children grew up reading books about him. Sculptures were erected in conservation centers worldwide, and his story became part of environmental studies in schools. More lions were rescued. More cages were emptied. And across every continent, people whispered the same thing. If Caesar could choose kindness, so can we. In his twilight years, Caesar remained in good health. Slower now, with grayer whiskers and a gait that betrayed his age, but his spirit, still undimmed. He often sat atop his favorite rock at sunset, looking over the hills. Sometimes alone. Sometimes joined by a young lion born in the refuge, one of the new generation. Lydia, watching from afar, placed her hand over her heart. He had changed the world. But most importantly, he had reminded it what was possible. And when Caesar's time finally came, many seasons later, he passed peacefully beneath the stars, surrounded by the land he had helped protect. Not as a prisoner, not as a beast, but as a legend. The sanctuary held a ceremony. Daniel, now a teenager, placed a wreath beside the memorial stone. "He saved my life," he whispered. "And he gave me purpose." A lion's roar echoed across the plains in the distance. One of Caesar's sons, grown tall and strong, adding his voice to the night sky. Caesar was more than a lion. He was a bridge between worlds, one built from compassion, courage, and an unforgettable act of mercy. He didn't just save a boy that day. He changed the way we see lions forever. If this story moved you, subscribe for more incredible journeys of hope, survival, and second chances.